Okay, we are live. That might be a good plan. All right, so let me give you a little information. So this week we've got 3 goals for this week. One major goal is we have to take our STAR math test. I had planned on us taking it today, getting it done and over with, but first hour, half of my students could not log in because of network errors. So, and I like to keep y'all all the same as much as I possibly can. So, we're going to try to take the STAR math test tomorrow, which will give us adequate time to make up anybody who's not here tomorrow. Excuse me. Friday, you will be having a final quiz, test, whatever you want to call it, okay? That will be on Friday. I'm doing it on Friday to give myself an opportunity to make that up for anyone who's absent. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Because I won't see y'all Thursday and Friday of next week. Yeah, because we get out at 1. I may see y'all for a few minutes, but what they've done in the past is just go from lunch and so to buses. So I probably will not see y'all Thursday and Friday of next week. So I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to make up that test. Okay. So this packet that you have right here, this thick old packet, is your review for your test. And you do not have to do this entire packet, but I wanted to give you plenty of problems to practice. I am going to take this up on the day you take your test, and I am going to give you a grade for working. Okay? I don't like to ask y'all to do stuff and then not give you a grade for it. So you will get a grade for working on this, okay? You just have to do good work.
So like a really good one problem.
Well
If I put an X, like I'm trying to solve it. Throwing a little bit of everything in one problem.
okay, no. Okay, so here's the thing. This first page we're going to do together. This whole first page. And this first page has the 4 different methods for solving problems that we've used, okay? And so we're going to do this one so that you have a guideline to go by. Now, here's what my suggestion is to you. The back of the first page is those same 4 different types. I would suggest you try all of those. Okay, that's one of each. All right. Then that next page, the front of that next page has where you have them to solve, but it's also a which way would you do this sort of thing, right? And determining which way you would do it is a big part of it, okay? So these are, you can practice on these, but also you can just look and say, I would do it this method, or I would do that method, or whatever, okay? If you look at the back of that page, it has a few more to solve where you're picking the method. They're not telling you how to do it. So if you have some problem, if you do those first 4 and you need extra work on a specific type, that's the type I would work on. Does that make sense? The discriminant at the bottom of that's what we covered on Friday, doing the discriminant and how to determine the type of solutions, the number of solutions, whether they're real or imaginary or none. And then this is more just review for you to just factoring review. And that's the front and back of that. And then there's square root review. There is factor review again. Completing the square review. Use the quadratic formula review. So you see there's lots of problems to help you. Now here, let's talk about how you study for a math test, okay? You make sure you know how to do the problems. So if you do the problem and you're not doing them right, that's not helpful. So you do the problems, you check to see if you're doing them right. If you are doing it right, you don't need to do any more of that. You got that, right? If you're not doing it right, you need to figure out what you're doing wrong and practice that one some more till you are doing them right. Does that make sense? So, could one person do a whole bunch and one person not do very much and then get the same grade on this? Yes, it's based on if you're doing them right or not, right? So if you're doing them correctly, you don't need to do a whole bunch of them. Does that make sense, everybody? So today we're going to do this first page together, and I'm going to let you work. And you can work on as much as you want to work on. Okay? Don't be stupid. You're studying for a test. A test that can affect your grade a whole bunch, right? So you need to actually work. You need to not visit and chit-chat and get your Chromebook out and watch a movie. Okay? Then we will look at this page, this graphing page tomorrow, and we'll talk about that. And then you'll do practice on those types of problems, okay? And that's pretty much what your test is going to be. Got it? Everybody good? Okay, so let's jump right to it. So let's start with the square root method. So how do you determine if you're going to use a square root method or not? Well, if it's in this format where you can easily get this parenthesis with the square by itself, you want to use that square root method. All we have to do to solve this is we got to move that 2. So let's do that. How do we get that 2 out of there? Subtract 2. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, right? And then that leaves us with this x plus 3 squared. And over here we have negative 12, right? Now, to get that x plus 3 by itself, what are we going to do? Take the square root. This is why it's called the square root method, right? So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Now, something probably jumped out at you whenever I said we're going to take the square root of negative 12. It's going to be an imaginary number. Now, you've got 2 options here. You can either put your calculator into imaginary number mode by clicking the mode button. And then first you should turn your calculator on, okay? So turn your calculator on, click the mode button, and then down here where it says real or A plus BI, you want A plus BI to be black. That means it's selected, okay? You can either put it in imaginary number mode, or you can just take the square root. You can just take the square root of 12. Oh, I don't know what I got going on there. Hang on. Let me clear this all out. Okay, take the square root of 12. Hit enter, take that number and add an I to the end of it. That's all your calculator is going to do. It's just going to add an I to the end of that. So we're going to round to the nearest tenth here. So it's going to be 3.5i. But don't forget, it's a positive or a negative. Anytime you take the square root from here on out, you're always going to have a positive or negative value for that, okay? Unless, let me backtrack a second. Unless you're finding a measurement. Because measurements cannot be negative, right? So if you're taking the square root of something to find a measurement, that has to be a positive value. Everybody with me? Okay, then what's our next step here? Minus 3. Now, oh, I forgot my I. Now, if these were just numbers, just real numbers, we would do the math, right? But because that's imaginary and this is real, you can't actually add or subtract imaginary and real numbers. You can show you're adding and subtracting them, but you can't actually add and subtract them. Y'all see what I'm saying? So we want to write it in that complex number form, just like your calculator has. That's A plus BI, where this is your real number and this is your imaginary number, okay? So if we're writing it like that, then our real number in this scenario is negative 3, and we put it first. Our imaginary number is 3.5i. Now we actually have 2 answers here. We have negative 3 plus 3.5i, excuse me, and negative 3 minus 3.55. But we don't have to write it twice. We can just write that plus negative in between them like that. And that's acceptable. Okay? Everybody good? Now, if for some reason you were somewhere and they wanted you to write them twice, then you would write them twice, like this. Okay, it's two different answers, this or that. But this is acceptable for me. Are we good? Are we ready to move on to the next one? So this one says to factor. Now remember, this is a simple one, but to help you remember how to do the more complex ones, we're going to do this in the more complex way, okay? Not necessary for this one. I just want to help you remember how to do that. So remember, you make your x like this, right? And up here you put whatever a times c is. And down here you put whatever b is. So what is a times c in this problem? It's going to be negative 15, right? 1 times negative 15 is negative 15. And what is b in this problem? Negative 2. So you're wanting something that multiplies to get negative 15, but adds to get negative 2. So two numbers that multiply to get negative 15, but add to get negative 2. What about our signs on them? Negative 5, positive 3, right? So those two numbers are going to go in our box here and here. So x squared goes here. Negative 15 goes there. One of these is negative 5x. The other is positive 3x. That's these two numbers right here that we just found. Okay, so then we figure out, all right, what goes here and here? X and X. And because these are just X, we don't have to worry about where we put them, right? If these were something other than just X, we'd have to figure out how they would fit best with the 3X and 5X. But we don't have anything, they're just X and X. Now, what do we multiply X by to get 3X? What do we multiply X by to get negative 5X? Do negative 5 and 3 multiply to get negative 15? Yes. Okay, so we know our factors are x minus 5 and x plus 3. Now, we're adding a step on here that we haven't done before, because this says factor to solve. So we're looking for what could x be, right? Now, y'all, I was grown before I understood this. I mean, I was teaching math before this dawned on me that this next thing I'm about to tell you, or about to get y'all to figure out. This inside this parenthesis and this inside this parenthesis is a number, right? And we're multiplying two numbers together, and our answer is 0. Y'all following me so far? So whatever's in here and whatever's in here multiplies together, and we get 0 as an answer. So what assumption can you make about the two numbers that have been multiplied together?
They're the same.
One of them has to be 0. You can only multiply two things together and get 0 if one of the things you're multiplying, or both, is 0, right? That means that x minus 5 has to equal 0, or x plus 3 has to equal 0. One of those two things has to be true. This or that. So then we want to know, now our goal is find x. Landon's already done this in his head. But in case your brain doesn't work that way, you can just solve these little baby equations. So to solve this little baby equation, we'd add 5 to both sides, right? X equals 5. Or over here, we would subtract 3 from both sides. X equals -3, right? It's essentially always going to be the opposite of whatever's right there. But just so you understand why that is. Because I remember my math teacher, who I thought was the best math teacher in the world when I was in her class, just telling us, well, it's just the opposite. But I didn't know why. It didn't make sense. I was just like, okay. But I didn't understand why it was the opposite. Do y'all see why it's the opposite? Okay. Now, what this means is if we take this 5 and we plug it in there, I'm going to do it. You do not have to do this part. This is just for show. Okay? Our answers are here. But if we plug that in, and I do 5 squared is -2 times 5 is -10. So what's 25 minus 10? What's 15 minus 15? See how we get 0 there? If we plug this -3 in, so we did -3 squared minus 2 times -3 minus 15. So 3 squared is -2 times -3. What's 9 and 6? What's 15 minus 15? See how we get 0 when we plug those in? That's how we know it's a true statement. All right, y'all good? Okay, by the way, that last part I did was just for show and tell, okay? It wasn't part of the problem. All right, let's go down to completing the square. So completing the square was the type y'all liked. Y'all said this one was fun. Do y'all remember doing this? Okay, when you're completing the squares, when you look at it and you say, I don't think there's anything that multiplies to get 3 that's going to add and get 8. But you know what I could do? I could complete the square. So you would subtract 3 from both sides. Because our goal right there is to get x squared minus 8x by itself. So x squared minus 8x. And over here we got -3. Right? And then we're going to be like, you know what? I need to add something to this that makes that a perfect square trinomial. So to find out what I'm going to add, I'm going to take my b value. I'm going to divide that b value by 2, and then I'm going to square it. So in this case, that means I'm going to take -8, divide it by 2, and square it. So what's -8 divided by 2? And then I square it. So I'm going to be adding 16 to both sides. And as long as you do it to both sides, you're cool. You can't add it to one side, but you can add it to both of them at the same time. Right? Now, our whole purpose behind doing that, our whole goal, was so that we have a perfect square trinomial over there on the left. So that we can factor it as a binomial squared. And the binomial that's squared is that x, and then whatever we squared to get 16. So what did we square to get 16? Right? Because we squared a -4 to get that 16 in there. And then over here, what we got? 13? Now, once you get to this place, you're actually using another method we've already used. What are we going to do next? So we're going to use the square root method because we're going to take the square root of both sides, right? So that's going to give us x minus 4 equals positive or negative because we took the square root of, so it's going to be between 3 and 4. 3.6. And now we're going to add 4 to both sides, right? Now, the first time we did the square root method, we couldn't add these together because one was imaginary and one was real. But this time, we actually have 2 real numbers. So we can do 3.6 plus 4 and -3.6 plus 4. And we're going to get 2 real number answers. The top one's going to be 7.6. Bottom one's going to be Nah, just had a little brain thing. And those are both our answers. Jerry, wake up. Wake up. You good so far? All right, last one. I'm going to just let y'all work, okay? So the last one is the quadratic equation. And it's from, remember on Thursday we did all the songs and y'all learned the quadratic equation, remember? Can anybody tell me what it is without me writing it first? X equals negative b plus or minus square root
minus 4 divided by
2. Okay, so if you don't know that yet, you got to learn it, okay? You got to learn it. If that means you write it 100 times, write it 100 times. It means you Google or YouTube and play one of them songs on repeat till you know it, then do that, okay? Whatever it takes, you've got to learn that thing, all right? So, now remember, it has to be in standard form, which means it has to be ax squared plus bx plus c. Is this one in standard form? Yes. Now, what is our b? So we're going to do negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 6 times 1, all divided by 2 times 6, right? Now, before we go any further, I can tell right now, just by looking at those numbers, I'm going to have an imaginary number. Does anybody see why? And it's going to be bigger than this over here. Someone earlier today said, well, that 4 times 6 is going to overpower your b squared. And they're right. Like, it's a negative and it's bigger, right? So, y'all can use your calculator if you want to, but I will give you a warning. Zaylee figured out 4th period. You cannot put this in as a fraction. You have to do the whole top first and then hit divide and divide by 12. If you put it in as a fraction, it gives you an error. But if you do it the top and then divide, you can divide by the bottom. Okay? I'm going to do it out longhand while you are doing that. Okay, your answer may be a little bit off from mine because I rounded up here and you didn't round till you got to the end. So my 4.5 is a rounded number and you're not rounding until you get to the very end, so they may be slightly different, but they're close enough. Okay? Did you get this? Okay, let me show you how I would put this in because that's where the key to it's going to be. So we've got negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared times 4 times 6 times 1. Okay, so this is what I would do. I would do negative 2 plus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 6. And I wouldn't even bother putting that times 1 in there because it makes no difference, right? You can put it in there. It just doesn't have any effect on it. Then I'm going to hit enter. This is what I got.
That's not what
That is not what?
I typed it in just so you had it.
Yeah, I got that.
Is your calculator in imaginary number mode? So this will only work if your calculator is in imaginary number mode. And then once you hit that point, if you hit divide by 12, because 6 times 2 is 12, right? Then you should get this, negative 0.16 repeating, plus .373. So my answer that I had was 0.375, and that difference is a rounding error. If we rounded to the nearest tenth, we'd have the same answers. Does that make sense? Everybody good? Y'all ready to work? All right, y'all work as much or as little as you want. Just remember, you are studying for a test, so don't be dumb and just don't do it. That's just not smart. You've got this opportunity to study for your test. It's going to be a large part of your grade, so let's make it count. Yes, ma'am. Huh?
Did you stop the same?
Running over here like that 10 seconds really makes a huge difference. Okay.